"Sir, this is our premium first-class cabin." The words came with a smile, but it was the kind that only shows up when someone's already judged you. Julian Westbrook didn't flinch. He'd been mistaken for an intern, a driver, even security. But never by someone paid to represent his own company. He looked up, voice steady. "Don't worry. I know exactly where I'm supposed to be." "Where are you watching from?" What happens when quiet power walks into a room and no one realizes it's watching? Moments earlier, it had started with a smile. Not a kind one, but the kind polished by training and worn by those who've already decided who matters. The flight attendant's name tag read Logan Price, and his eyes dropped to Julian Westbrook's hoodie before he ever looked at his face. The flight attendant's voice carried that special kind of politeness reserved for unwelcome guests. His name tag read Logan Price, and his perfect smile didn't reach his eyes as he looked down at Julian Westbrook, specifically at Julian's worn gray hoodie, faded jeans, and scuffed sneakers. The first-class cabin of Skylynx Air's flagship Boeing 787 gleamed with luxury. Ambient lighting bathed the space in soft blue. Champagne glasses clinked. Men in tailored suits and women in designer dresses settled into their premium seats for the 6-hour journey from San Diego to Boston. And then there was Julian, in seat 1A. Logan's smile tightened. "Sir, this is our premium first-class cabin." His tone made it clear what he wasn't saying: "You don't belong here." Julian looked up, meeting Logan's gaze with quiet intensity. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. "Yes," Julian replied softly. "I know exactly where I am." "Where are you watching from?" Drop your city in the comments. This story might change how you see the world around you today. Julian Westbrook had boarded Skylynx Air Flight 1457 under the name J. West, a simple precaution he often took when traveling. At 35, he had grown accustomed to the assumptions people made about him based on appearance alone. His worn gray hoodie, a reminder of where he'd come from, had traveled with him from his days coding in a cramped apartment to boardrooms across the world. The boarding gate attendant had given him the same skeptical once-over that Logan was giving him now. Julian had simply handed over his boarding pass and moved on. He never argued these points. Experience had taught him that actions revealed more than words ever could. "May I see your boarding pass again, sir?" Logan's voice cut through Julian's thoughts. The "sir" carried a hint of skepticism. Julian reached into his hoodie pocket and produced the premium boarding pass. Logan scrutinized it, his expression shifting from doubt to forced accommodation. "Very well, Mr. West." Logan handed back the boarding pass. "Would you care for a pre-flight beverage?" "Water, please." "Thank you." Julian's voice was calm, measured, the voice of a man who knew his worth wasn't determined by others' perceptions. As Logan moved away, Julian noticed another flight attendant watching the interaction. Her name tag read Elena Cruz. Unlike Logan, her expression showed genuine curiosity rather than judgment. She offered a small, genuine smile before continuing her pre-flight duties. Julian settled into his seat, feeling the premium leather against his back. He hadn't always flown first class. For the first 3 years of building his company, he'd flown economy, pouring every spare dollar back into the business. Even now, with a net worth that had long since passed the billion-dollar mark, he found more comfort in his hoodie than in luxury. Logan returned with Julian's water, placing it on his armrest with practiced precision but minimal eye contact. "Anything else, sir?" The question was procedural, not genuine. "No, thank you." Julian took a sip of water and turned his attention to his phone. The cabin continued to fill. A silver-haired executive in an Italian suit took the seat beside Julian, giving him a sideways glance before focusing on his own devices. Julian was used to being invisible in these spaces, or worse, being seen as out of place. Once boarding completed, Logan began his safety demonstration in the first-class cabin, his movements elegant and rehearsed. His gaze swept past Julian as if the seat were empty. The aircraft pushed back from the gate, and Julian felt the familiar rumble of engines. Flying still amazed him, a testament to human ingenuity and ambition. It was that sense of wonder that had first inspired him to reimagine air travel 8 years ago, when he'd founded what would become Skylinks Air. As the plane climbed to cruising altitude, Julian overheard Logan speaking with the silver-haired executive. "Can I get you anything, Mr. Hartman?" Logan's voice was warm, engaged. "Manhattan, neat," the executive replied without looking up from his tablet. "Excellent choice, sir. We have a wonderful small batch bourbon that I think you'll appreciate." Julian watched the interaction without expression. The difference in service wasn't new to him. When Logan eventually returned to Julian's row, his approach was purely functional. "Beverage service, sir." "I'll have the same bourbon you recommended to Mr. Hartman," Julian said. A flicker of surprise crossed Logan's face. "Of course." His response was clipped. When the drink arrived, Julian noticed it was served without the warm description of its qualities or the small plate of gourmet nuts that had accompanied his neighbor's identical drink. He accepted it with a nod and returned to his work. Midway through the flight, meal service began. Logan delivered an elaborate description of the menu to the other first-class passengers, the chef's inspiration, the sourcing of ingredients, the wine pairings. When he reached Julian, the presentation became a memorized recitation. "Today's options are beef tenderloin or seared salmon." "The salmon, please," Julian replied. When the meal arrived, Julian noticed Elena delivering it instead of Logan. She placed it before him with genuine care. "The salmon is accompanied by a lemon dill reduction and roasted seasonal vegetables," she explained, her voice warm. "Can I get you anything else to make your flight more comfortable?" Julian looked up, momentarily surprised by the shift in service. "This is perfect, thank you." Elena nodded. "I'm just doing my job, sir." There was something in her eyes, a genuine respect for every passenger regardless of appearance. As she moved away, Julian overheard Logan's hushed voice from the galley. "Why are you wasting the full-service routine on Hoodie guy? He probably used points or got upgraded somehow." Elena's response was too quiet to hear, but her expression remained professional. Julian turned his attention back to his meal, letting the conversation fade into the ambient hum of the aircraft. 3 hours into the flight, Julian needed to stretch his legs. He made his way toward the lavatory, passing Logan who was arranging items in a service cart. "Excuse me," Julian said politely. Logan barely moved aside, creating just enough space for Julian to pass. As Julian continued forward, he caught Logan's reflection in a panel, the slight eye roll, the subtle shake of the head. Small gestures that spoke volumes. In the lavatory, Julian splashed water on his face and studied his reflection. His closely cropped hair, the trim beard, the calm eyes that had seen both poverty and wealth. The hoodie, his armor, and his reminder. He wasn't playing anyone's game but his own. Upon returning to his seat, Julian noticed the silver-haired executive had engaged Elena in conversation. "This is my third Skylinks flight this month," the man was saying. "The service is why I switched all my business travel to your airline." "We appreciate your loyalty, Mr. Hartman," Elena replied. "Skylinks prides itself on recognizing the value of every passenger." Julian caught Elena's eye as he passed. Something in her expression suggested she truly believed the words she'd just spoken. It was refreshing. As the flight progressed into its final hours, Logan maintained his differential treatment, attentive to other passengers, perfunctory with Julian. The pattern was familiar to Julian, who had experienced similar treatment in venture capital offices, at industry conferences, in hotel lobbies. Spaces where people like him weren't expected to belong. Julian worked quietly on his tablet, reviewing the very flight service protocols that Logan was selectively applying. The irony wasn't lost on him. Tomorrow's scheduled training session at Skylink's headquarters had been on his calendar for months, a routine review of company culture and service standards with the Boston-based crew. He hadn't planned to make an example of this flight. He never did. Julian believed in systems, not spectacles. But the systemic nature of what he was experiencing wasn't something he could ignore, especially not in the company he had built from nothing. As the aircraft began its descent into Boston, Julian put away his work and gazed out the window at the approaching coastline. The city where he'd gone to college, where the idea for Skylinks had first taken shape in a dorm room, where he'd pitched his first investors and been turned away 15 times before getting his seed funding. Logan's voice interrupted his thoughts. "Sir, please ensure your seat is in the upright position for landing." Julian's seat was already upright. He simply nodded. "And your tray table," Logan added, despite the fact that Julian's tray was already stowed. "Thank you," Julian replied evenly, meeting Logan's gaze without challenge or submission. The aircraft touched down smoothly on the runway. As the plane taxied to the gate, the cabin filled with the sounds of seatbelts unfastening and overhead bins opening. "Thank you for flying with Skylinks Air," Logan announced to the first-class cabin. "We know you have many choices for air travel, and we appreciate you choosing us." As passengers began to deplane, Julian remained seated, allowing others to exit first. He watched Logan assist the silver-haired executive with his jacket, engaging in friendly conversation about Boston restaurants. When the cabin had nearly emptied, Julian stood and collected his single carry-on bag from the overhead bin. Logan stood near the exit, offering perfunctory thanks to departing passengers. When Julian approached, Logan's "Thank you for flying Skylinks" was delivered with practiced indifference. Julian paused at the doorway. "Mr. Price," he said, reading the name tag once more. "Yes, sir." Logan replied, clearly surprised at being addressed by name. Julian considered saying something, about respect, about assumptions, about tomorrow. Instead, he simply nodded. "Have a good evening," he said, and stepped off the plane into the jetway. Behind him, Elena watched his departure with thoughtful eyes. The text message arrived on Logan Price's phone at 8:42 p.m., just as he was settling into his hotel room. "All Boston-based flight attendants, mandatory meeting tomorrow at HQ, 8 a.m. sharp. Collins Training Room. Attendance required. No exceptions." Logan frowned at his phone. Last-minute mandatory meetings were unusual. He texted his colleague. "Elena, did you get the HQ summons?" Her reply came quickly, "Yes." "Any idea what it's about?" "No clue. Probably some new protocol rollout." Logan tossed his phone onto the bed and headed to the shower. Across town at a different hotel, Elena Cruz sat on the edge of her bed, staring thoughtfully at her phone. Something about the day's flight kept replaying in her mind. The man in seat 1A. The worn hoodie that contrasted with his quiet confidence. The way Logan had treated him compared to the other passengers. And now this sudden meeting. Elena opened her Skylinks employee app and scrolled through recent company announcements. One item caught her attention: CEO Julian Westbrook to conduct Boston service training sessions this week. She hadn't seen the CEO in person before, few flight attendants had. Westbrook was known to be private, rarely appearing in media. The company's rapid growth had made him a business legend, but his face wasn't widely recognized outside industry circles. Elena tapped on the announcement. There was no photo, just a brief professional biography. Julian Westbrook founded Skylinks Air in 2016 with a mission to transform the flying experience. The MIT graduate has built the airline on principles of dignity, excellence, and respect for all passengers regardless of background. A thought began forming in Elena's mind. The mysterious passenger in seat 1A. The sudden meeting. She did a quick internet search for Julian Westbrook Skylinks. Most results showed only business articles. Finally, she found a small photo from an aviation industry conference 3 years earlier. The image was grainy, but she could make out a trim black man in business casual attire, speaking at a podium. She enlarged the image, studying the features. The same calm eyes. The same closely cropped hair and neat beard. "Oh my God," she whispered. Elena quickly texted Logan, "Did you happen to notice the passenger in 1A today? The one in the hoodie?" Logan's reply came a few minutes later, "Hoodie guy. What about him?" Elena hesitated, then decided against sharing her suspicion. "Just curious. Seemed interesting. Seemed like he wandered into the wrong cabin to me," Logan replied with a laughing emoji. Elena put down her phone, a mixture of anticipation and concern settling in her stomach. If she was right about tomorrow's meeting. Meanwhile, in a penthouse suite at the Four Seasons, Julian Westbrook gazed out at the Boston skyline. He'd changed from his travel clothes into a similar gray hoodie, though few would notice this one was cashmere, custom made by a French fashion house that had courted his business. On the coffee table lay a folder containing the service reports from Flight 1457. The data told a story of inconsistency, high satisfaction scores from some passengers, markedly lower from others. The pattern wasn't random. Julian's phone buzzed with a text from his chief of operations. "Training room confirmed for 8 a.m. Will the 9 a.m. all staff still follow?" "Yes," Julian replied. "But I'll handle the first hour personally." He returned his gaze to the city lights. Julian hadn't built Skylinks to create gotcha moments or public shamings. That wasn't his style. What he had built was a company culture document that began with a single principle: every person who steps onto our aircraft deserves the same level of respect and service, regardless of appearance, background, or circumstance. Tomorrow wouldn't be about punishment. It would be about reinforcing that founding principle. The next morning arrived with a gentle rain falling over Boston. By 7:30 a.m., Logan Price was walking into Skylinks headquarters, coffee in hand, navigating the modern glass and steel building with the confidence of someone who belonged in premium spaces. He nodded to colleagues in the lobby, making his way to the elevator. Logan had been flying with Skylinks for 4 years and took pride in his position. The airline's meteoric rise had made it a prestigious employer, and he enjoyed the status that came with his uniform. When he arrived at the Collins training room, he was surprised to find Elena already there, sitting quietly near the front of the room. "Early bird," he commented, taking a seat beside her. "Any intel on what this is about?" Elena shook her head. "Nothing definite." She seemed unusually reserved. Other crew members from yesterday's flight and several Boston-based teams filed in, filling the room with subdued morning conversation. At precisely 8 a.m., the door at the front of the room opened. The conversation died immediately. A black man in his mid-30s entered. He wore dark jeans, white sneakers, and a familiar gray hoodie. His presence commanded attention without effort. Several gasps of recognition came from around the room. Logan stared, coffee cup frozen halfway to his mouth. "Seat 1A. Hoodie guy." Except now, standing at the front of the training room, he was clearly something else entirely. "Good morning," the man said, his voice carrying the same quiet confidence it had on the plane. "For those who don't know me, my name is Julian Westbrook. I'm the founder and CEO of Skylinks Air." The silence in the room deepened. Logan felt his face grow hot. "I want to thank you all for the work you do representing our airline," Julian continued. "Today, I'd like to have a conversation about why this company exists and what it stands for." Julian moved to the center of the room, making eye contact with various team members. When his gaze met Logan's, it held no anger, no triumph, only a calm intensity. "Yesterday, I flew as a passenger on Flight 1457 from San Diego to Boston. I do this regularly on different routes, using a simplified version of my name. Not as a secret shopper exercise, but as a way to experience our airline the way our customers do." Julian paused, letting his words settle. "What I experienced yesterday was a stark reminder of why I started this company in the first place. 8 years ago, I flew first class on a competitor airline, my first time upgrading after a successful funding round. I wore clothes similar to these." He gestured to his hoodie and jeans. "I was treated like an intruder. Made to feel unwelcome in a space I had every right to occupy." Elena glanced sideways at Logan, whose complexion had gone from flush to pale. "I founded Skylinks with a promise, that every person on our aircraft would be treated with the same level of respect and service. That we would be the airline that recognized the humanity in every passenger, regardless of appearance, background, or assumptions." Julian walked slowly across the front of the room. "Yesterday, I observed a passenger in seat 1A being treated with markedly different service than passengers in 1B, 2A, and others. Shorter interactions. Minimal descriptions of services. Different tone. Subtle but unmistakable signals that this passenger didn't belong." The room remained silent. Logan stared at his hands. "I'm not here to single anyone out or create a spectacle," Julian continued. "That passenger was me, but this isn't about me. It's about the next person who boards our aircraft looking different than expected. It's about the company we're building together, and whether our actions align with our stated values." He looked around the room again, his expression thoughtful. "I'd like to hear your thoughts on this. What does it mean to truly see each person who boards our aircraft?" For several long moments, no one spoke. Then, Elena raised her hand. "Sir, I think it means remembering that we never know someone's full story from their appearance. The person in casual clothes might be a CEO. But more importantly, even if they're not, they deserve the same respect and service as anyone else." Julian nodded appreciatively. "Thank you, Miss Cruz." Several other attendants offered their perspectives. Julian listened attentively to each, building on their comments, creating a genuine dialogue rather than delivering a lecture. Logan sat in silence, the reality of his actions settling heavily on his shoulders. As the discussion continued, Logan Price felt increasingly uncomfortable. He'd prided himself on providing excellent service, but Julian Westbrook's words forced him to confront an uncomfortable truth: his excellence had been selectively applied. Finally, Logan raised his hand. The room fell silent. "Mr. Westbrook," he began, his voice less confident than usual. "I was the lead flight attendant on yesterday's flight. He paused, searching for words. "I failed to uphold our standards. There's no excuse for that." Julian studied him thoughtfully. "Mr. Price, would you say yesterday was an anomaly in your service approach?" The question hung in the air. Logan could claim it was a one-time lapse, but Julian's calm gaze made dissembling impossible. "No, sir," Logan admitted. I've always prided myself on reading passengers, on knowing who would appreciate what kind of service. I see now that I wasn't reading them, I was judging them. Julian nodded, neither condemning nor absolving. Recognition is the first step toward change, Mr. Price. He turned to address the entire room again. We all carry biases from our experiences, from society, from countless sources. The question isn't whether we have these biases, it's whether we recognize them and actively work to ensure they don't determine how we treat others. Julian moved toward the windows, where rain continued to fall on the Boston skyline. When I started Skylinks, many industry veterans told me I was naive. They said air travel was about efficiency, not humanity. That passengers understood the hierarchy, even expected it. He turned back to face the room. But I still believe, that dignity isn't a luxury amenity. It's a fundamental right. The room remained silent, absorbing his words. Our metrics show that Skylinks has the highest customer satisfaction in the industry. That's not despite our emphasis on equal respect, it's because of it. People feel the difference when they're truly seen. Julian picked up a tablet from the front table and pulled up a presentation. I'd like to spend the rest of our hour reviewing our service principles and discussing practical scenarios. This isn't about shame or blame. It's about recommitting to the vision that makes Skylinks different. For the next 45 minutes, Julian led the group through thoughtful exercises and discussions. He was knowledgeable but approachable, authoritative without being authoritarian. Throughout, he wore the same gray hoodie, now a visible symbol of the disconnection between appearance and worth. As the session neared its end, Julian addressed the room one final time. Tomorrow, each of you will board an aircraft and represent Skylinks to hundreds of passengers. Some will be business travelers in suits. Some will be families with young children. Some might be in hoodies and jeans, looking nothing like what you expect in their assigned seats. He paused, looking around the room with genuine care. Your challenge, our challenge, is to see past appearances to the humanity beneath. To provide service based not on assumptions, but on the simple truth that every person deserves to be treated with dignity. Julian checked his watch. The all-staff meeting will begin in 10 minutes. Please take a short break. And thank you for your attention and participation this morning. As people began to stand and stretch, Julian approached Logan, who remained seated, still processing the morning's revelations. Mr. Price, Julian said quietly. Logan looked up, expecting reprimand or dismissal. Instead, Julian extended his hand. I believe people can grow. I built this company on that belief. Logan stood and accepted the handshake, meeting Julian's gaze directly for the first time. Thank you, sir. I won't forget this lesson. See that you don't, Julian replied, not unkindly. And remember, it's not about me or my position. It's about who we choose to be when we think no one important is watching. As Julian moved away to speak with other team members, Elena approached Logan. You okay? She asked. Logan shook his head slightly. I've been so proud of working for this airline, of what it represents. And then I completely failed to live up to its most basic principle. We all have room to grow, Elena said. That's what made today different. He could have fired you, made an example of you. Instead, he created a learning moment, not just for you, but for all of us. Logan looked across the room at Julian, who was engaged in conversation with several other crew members, his manner as attentive with them as with anyone else. That's real leadership, Logan said quietly. Quiet authority. No need to prove anything. Exactly what he was trying to show us, Elena replied. As the room emptied for the break, Julian Westbrook remained, still wearing his gray hoodie, the garment that had triggered such different treatment just a day earlier. Now, in the context of his position, no one questioned his right to wear whatever he chose. The irony wasn't lost on him. The same man in the same clothes, treated entirely differently when his title was known. That was precisely the mindset he had built Skylinks to change. Julian checked his notes for the all-staff meeting. Unlike many CEOs, he knew that lasting change didn't come from grand speeches or punitive measures. It came from consistent example, from systems that reinforced the right behaviors, from a culture that valued the humanity in every interaction. He glanced up as the door opened. Logan Price had returned early from the break. "Mr. Westbrook," Logan said, approaching with purpose. "I wanted to thank you for this morning. And to apologize properly for my service yesterday." Julian regarded him thoughtfully. "Mr. Price, I don't want your apology to me. What I want is your commitment to the next passenger who doesn't fit your expectations." Logan nodded, understanding. "You have it, sir." "Then we move forward," Julian said simply. He extended his hand again, not as CEO to employee, but as one person to another. In that moment, both men understood something essential: true dignity didn't need to announce itself. It simply needed to be recognized, in oneself and in others, regardless of the clothes they wore or the seats they occupied. 2 weeks later, Julian Westbrook stood at a gate in Denver International Airport, once again wearing his gray hoodie as he prepared to board a Skylinks flight. The lineup of passengers represented a cross-section of humanity: business travelers, families, students, each with their own story. As the first-class passengers were called to board, Julian noticed the lead flight attendant greeting each person with the same genuine welcome: the elderly woman in a tracksuit, the teenager with an upgrade, the executives in tailored suits. Equal eye contact. Equal warmth. Equal dignity. This was why he had built Skylinks. Not for profit, though the company had succeeded beyond projections. Not for recognition, though industry awards lined the headquarters lobby. He had built it because dignity shouldn't depend on appearance. Because respect shouldn't be reserved for those who matched expectations. Because true leadership meant treating others with humanity, especially when you thought no one important was watching. As Julian took his seat, he thought of Logan Price and the lesson of that Boston flight. We all make judgments. The question is whether we let those judgments determine how we treat others. In life, as in business, we reveal our true character not through grand gestures, but through small, consistent acts of respect. The way we treat the person we think can't help us. The dignity we afford to those who don't seem to belong. Because sometimes, the person in the hoodie signs the paychecks. But more importantly, every person deserves the same respect, regardless of whether they do. Where are you showing up in your life with pride, principle, and quiet dignity? How are you treating others when you think no one important is watching? Share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to Motivation for Success for more stories that change how you see the world.